The sky over Pine Ridge darkened suddenly that winter afternoon. Mrs. Martha, with her 73 years of mountain experience, recognized the signs. This wouldn't be just any storm. Standing by the living room window, she observed the heavy clouds forming over the valleys of the Rocky Mountains, bringing with them the harbinger of something beyond rain. "The weather's going to turn ugly today," she murmured to herself, feeling the confirmation in her aching joints that only the elderly know how to interpret. The stone and wood house inherited from her ancestors had withstood many storms over the years. Isolated on a small property in the hills, it was her refuge and fortress. Martha lit the wood stove, preparing for the cold night ahead. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen when the first thunder broke the silence. "Saint Barbara!" she crossed herself reflexively. The rain began to fall violently on the zinc roof, creating a metallic symphony that Martha knew well. She settled at the kitchen table, wrapping her wrinkled hands around the cup, absorbing the heat emanating from it. Her gaze, however, remained restless. There was something different in the air, a kind of electricity that wasn't just from the storm. That's when she heard it. A scream, weak and distant, almost muffled by the sound of rain. Martha froze, the cup suspended in the air. It could just be the wind in the cracks of the window, she thought, but then it came again, clearer this time. A cry for help. "My God in heaven, someone's out there!" Martha hesitated for just a moment. Common sense told her to stay where she was safe and dry, but something stronger propelled her. She placed the cup on the table, put on the waterproof coat hanging near the door, pulled on her rubber boots and grabbed the old flashlight she kept for emergencies. "May Our Lady protect." "Me," she whispered, opening the back door. The rain greeted her mercilessly, soaking her wrinkled face. The slippery mud made each step difficult as she descended the small slope toward the abandoned train tracks that cut through her property. The flashlight projected a trembling beam in the absolute darkness. "Is anyone there?" she shouted, her voice almost lost in the roar of the storm. The scream came again, now weaker. Martha followed the sound, her heart racing. The tracks, which once served the railroad that connected the region, were now just a vestige of the past, overtaken by vegetation. When she reached the area, her eyes caught something unusual. An old wagon partially displaced, probably by the force of the flood. Approaching cautiously, Martha directed the flashlight toward an opening between the metal debris. What she saw made her heart tighten. A girl no more than 8 years old, huddled and trembling, trapped under a twisted structure. "My goodness!" she exclaimed, hurrying to her. But what really left her breathless was what she saw next. A black horse, imposing, standing beside the child. The animal remained motionless under the torrential rain, its lustrous coat reflecting the weak light of the flashlight, and its eyes. Martha had never seen eyes like that in an animal. Deep, intelligent, almost human. "Who are you, little one?" she asked, kneeling beside the girl. Emily." The answer came in an almost inaudible whisper. "And this horse?" The girl raised her eyes to the animal. "Shadow, he found me." Martha tried to move the metal structure that partially trapped the girl, but it was too heavy. She looked around, desperate, when the black horse took a step forward. Instinctively, Martha backed away, but something in the animal's gaze reassured her. It was as if he was there to help. "You're going to help me, aren't you?" she asked the horse, feeling strange for talking to an animal as if it could understand her. To her surprise, Shadow lowered his head, almost like a gesture of agreement, and positioned himself beside the metal structure. With the combined strength of Martha and the animal, they managed to move the twisted metal enough to free Emily. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. Martha wrapped the girl in her coat, protecting her as best she could from the relentless rain. Emily was cold and trembling, her eyes almost closing from exhaustion. "We need to get out of here, little one. My house isn't far." The elderly woman helped the girl stand up, but Emily could barely stay on her feet. Martha lifted her in her arms, surprising herself with her own strength that she didn't know she still possessed. The fear and urgency of the moment gave her a vigor that the years tried to take away. "And Shadow," whispered Emily, looking at the horse that remained motionless in the rain. "If he wants, he'll follow us," replied Martha, uncertain about what to do with that mysterious animal. As if understanding the words, Shadow began to follow them, maintaining a respectful distance. The journey back was arduous. Martha, with the girl in her arms and the flashlight precariously secured between her fingers, struggled against the slippery mud and incessant rain. Several times she felt she would fall, but somehow found her balance again. When she finally reached the house, she gently placed Emily on the living room sofa. She turned on the lights and could finally see the child's condition. She was soaked with scratches on her face and arms. Her blue dress, now stained with mud, seemed too expensive for an ordinary child. "Let's get these wet clothes off," said Martha, fetching towels and one of her old nightgowns. While drying and dressing the girl, Martha talked softly, trying to keep her awake. "Where do you come from, Emily? Who are your parents?" The girl just shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. Only after being dry, wrapped in blankets, and with a cup of hot tea in her hands, did she seem to relax a little. "My father," she began hesitantly. "Richard Blackwood." Martha's eyes widened. Richard Blackwood was known throughout the region. Owner of vast lands in the neighboring town and a famous horse-breeding farm, he was a powerful and reserved man. Few had access to his property, surrounded by mysteries and rumors. "What happened to you, Emily? How did you end up on the tracks?" The girl lowered her gaze. "I ran away," she answered with a trembling voice. "I couldn't stay there. They were going to hurt me again." Martha felt a shiver run down her spine. "Who was going to hurt you, child?" Emily closed her eyes, as if trying to push away painful memories. "The men in lab coats. They do experiments, and with the horses, and—" her voice faltered. "With me, too." Martha sat down, stunned. What was this child saying? What kind of experiments? She needed to alert the authorities, but something told her the situation was more complex than it seemed. And Shadow? How did he appear? Emily's face lit up for a moment. "He always finds me. For as long as I can remember. When I'm in danger, he appears." Martha frowned. How could a horse do that? Unless— A noise on the porch interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she saw the imposing silhouette of Shadow, standing in the rain that now fell more gently. His eyes shone in the darkness, fixed on the house. "He's waiting for you," murmured Martha. Emily nodded with a small smile. "He always waits. He's more than a horse, you know. Sometimes I think he understands everything I say." Martha turned to observe the animal again. There was something about him, a presence that went beyond what one might expect from an ordinary animal. His intelligent eyes seemed to hold ancient secrets. "Rest now, little one. Tomorrow we'll decide what to do." Emily fell asleep quickly, exhausted. Martha, however, remained awake, watching over her restless sleep. The girl murmured in her dreams, disconnected words about laboratories, needles, and someone called Midnight. In the early hours of the morning, Martha was awakened from her doze in the armchair by a sharp scream. Emily was sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror. "Midnight! Where's Midnight?" she exclaimed, looking frantically around. "Calm down. Dear, who is Midnight?" asked Martha, trying to calm her. "My protector. He always comes back when I need him," replied the girl, hugging her own knees. Martha frowned, confused. "Are you talking about Shadow?" Emily shook her head negatively. "No. Midnight is different. He is inside me." The child's enigmatic words left Martha even more intrigued. What did that mean? What kind of trauma was this little girl carrying? When dawn broke, Martha prepared a simple breakfast. Emily ate with appetite, seeming calmer in the daylight. Through the kitchen window, they could see Shadow grazing peacefully in the yard, as if he had always belonged to that place. "I need to call the police, Emily. Your father must be worried," said Martha, carefully observing the girl's reaction. The immediate panic that took over the child's face confirmed her suspicions. "No," Emily's voice came out shrill. "Please don't call anyone, he'll find me." Martha sat at the table facing the girl and held her trembling hands. "Emily, I need to understand what's happening. Who will find you? Your father?" The girl nodded, her eyes welling up. "He's not like other fathers. He does bad things." A heavy silence settled in the kitchen. Martha didn't need to be an expert to recognize the genuine fear in the child's eyes. Years of life had taught her to distinguish truth from lies. "All right, I won't call anyone for now," she promised, stroking the girl's dark hair. "But we need a plan. We can't just stay here waiting." Emily visibly relaxed with the promise. Shadow. "We'll protect us," she said with surprising confidence. Martha looked out the window at the imposing black horse. It seemed impossible, but she felt there was truth in the girl's words. "How does he always find you, Emily?" The girl frowned, as if she had never really thought about it. "I don't know. He just appears when I need him, as if he could feel it." Martha recalled old stories told by her grandfather about horses with special gifts, capable of sensing dangers and finding lost people. But those were just legends, weren't they? Or perhaps there was something more, something that modern science still couldn't explain. The sound of a vehicle approaching interrupted her thoughts. A luxury car was slowly climbing the dirt road that led to her property. "It's him!" whispered Emily, panic evident in her voice. "It's my father's car." Martha quickly got up and went to the living room window. The black vehicle with darkened windows parked in the yard. A tall man, with an imposing posture, got out of the car. Richard Blackwood wore an impeccable suit, despite the mud that covered the road after the storm. His angular face displayed a neutral, almost calculating expression. "Stay inside," Martha instructed the girl. "Don't come out, no matter what you hear." Emily nodded, shrinking into the sofa and pulling a blanket over herself, as if trying to become invisible. Martha took a deep breath and went out to the porch. She would face this man as an equal, on her own territory. "Good morning, Mum," greeted Richard Blackwood, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I apologize for the unannounced visit, but I'm looking for my daughter, Emily. She disappeared during yesterday's storm." Martha observed him carefully. There was a studied elegance in his movements, as if each gesture were carefully calculated. "And what makes you think she would be here, Mr. Blackwood?" A flash of surprise crossed his face. "Ah, you know my name. Well, this is one of the last properties in the region. I'm checking all possibilities. I have people searching everywhere." Martha remained impassive. "The storm was strong. I hope you find her soon." Richard took a step forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "You didn't answer my question. Is my daughter here?" At that moment, Shadow appeared beside the house, neighed loudly and reared up on his hind legs. The sudden gesture made Richard back away, genuine surprise on his face. "This horse," he murmured, his composure shaken for the first time. Martha noticed the change in his expression. There was recognition there and something more, fear. "It's a wild animal that appeared after the storm," she replied casually. "It must have been scared by the rain." Richard couldn't take his eyes off. "The horse, it's not possible," he said, more to himself than to Martha. Shadow kept his distance, his eyes fixed on the man in an almost defiant posture. "Mr. Blackwood, if I may ask, what exactly happened to your daughter? How did she disappear during the storm?" Richard turned his attention to Martha, quickly regaining his composure. "Emily has a special condition, ma'am. She suffers from occasional delusions and needs constant medication. Yesterday, during one of her episodes, she ran away from our property. We are very concerned." "A special condition?" Martha inquired, maintaining a neutral tone, while internally processing the information. Was that true or just an excuse? "Yes, unfortunately. Since her mother's passing, she has developed severe psychological disorders. She creates stories, imaginary characters." Richard sighed dramatically. "She even believes that some of our horses talk to her." Martha nodded slowly, feigning understanding. "I see. It must be difficult for you." "You can't imagine how much," he replied, looking again at Shadow, who remained motionless a few meters away. "Are you sure you haven't seen her? An 8-year-old girl, dark hair, probably wearing a blue dress? Martha held his gaze without hesitating. I'm sorry, but I haven't seen anyone like that. Richard Blackwood cast one last suspicious glance at Martha's house before saying goodbye with excessive formality. If by chance you see her or hear anything, here's my card. Please contact me immediately. Martha took the card with a nod. Certainly, Mr. Blackwood. I hope you find your daughter safe and sound. As the luxury car moved away along the dirt road, Martha remained on the porch, watching until it disappeared. Around the bend. Only then did she allow herself to breathe in relief. Shadow, who had maintained his distance during the entire conversation, slowly approached, as if waiting for permission. You really aren't an ordinary horse, are you? Murmured Martha, extending her hand to touch the animal's muzzle. Briefly closed his eyes at the touch. In an almost human gesture of acceptance, Martha felt a shiver run down her spine. There was a connection there, something she couldn't fully understand, but felt in her core. When she returned, inside the house she found Emily huddled in the same place, her eyes fixed on the door. Is he gone? Asked the girl, her voice almost inaudible. He's gone for now, but he'll be back, I'm sure, replied Martha, sitting beside her. Emily, I need you to tell me the truth now. What does your father do to you? What are these experiments you mentioned? Emily hesitated, biting her lower lip. Her small eyes moved restlessly, as if looking for an escape. He's not my real father, she finally said. I mean, he is, but not like other fathers. Martha frowned, confused. What do you mean by that? He created me in a laboratory, Emily spoke slowly, as if each word were a weight to be carried. I was born different. I have things inside. Does things from horses. Martha felt her heart race. What was this child trying to say? What things, Emily? Genes, that's what they call them. Special genes. The girl pointed to her own chest. Midnight is in here, you see. Not like a ghost, but like a part of me. Martha tried to process the information. What seemed like a child's fantasy was beginning to take the contours of something much more sinister. And who is Midnight, exactly? The best horse my father ever had. A champion. He's not alive anymore, but his genes are in me. Emily looked at the window, where Shadow could be seen grazing calmly. And Shadow knows that. That's why he protects me. The pieces were beginning to fit together in Martha's mind, forming a disturbing picture. Richard Blackwood, known for his prize-winning horse breeding, was conducting some kind of genetic experiment, using his own daughter. Emily, are you telling me that your father mixed horse genes with yours? The girl nodded gravely. He wants to create the perfect horse, and also the perfect person. He says I'm special, unique, that I have abilities that no one else has. What abilities? Asked Martha, trying to maintain her composure in the face of this surreal revelation. Emily looked into Martha's eyes, and for an instant, the elderly woman saw something different in that gaze, something older, wiser. I can feel what they feel. The horses. I know when they're happy, sad, scared. Sometimes I know what they're thinking. She paused, biting her lip. And they can find me no matter where I am, like Shadow did. Martha took a deep breath, trying to order her thoughts. If what Emily was saying was true, they were facing something unimaginable. Illegal genetic experiments, manipulation, abuse of a child. They needed help, but who would believe this fantastic story? There's one more thing, continued Emily, her voice now firmer. My father isn't alone in this. There are other people, important people. They come from different places to see the results of the experiments. What people, Emily? Do you know their names? The girl shook her head negatively. I just call them the men in suits. They speak different languages sometimes, and they bring a lot of money. Martha felt a chill. The case was even more serious than she had imagined. An international network, possibly involved in illegal genetic research. A loud neigh from Shadow interrupted the conversation. The horse was agitated in the yard, as if sensing something. He's warning us, said Emily, suddenly alert. Someone's coming. Martha quickly got up and went to the window. A black pickup truck was approaching along the road, raising dust. "Do you know that vehicle?" she asked the girl. Emily joined her at the window, her eyes widening with fear. "They're—" "My father's men, the security guards." Her voice trembled. "They do the dirty work." Martha thought quickly. There was no way to escape. The road was the only way out of the property. "Let's go through the back to the barn. We can hide there until we think of something." Emily nodded, already running to get her coat. Martha grabbed a small bag, put in some provisions, a water bottle and her cell phone. "Shadow will help us," affirmed Emily with surprising conviction. "He always helps." The two quickly exited through the back of the house while the truck parked in the front yard. Martha led Emily through the small apple orchard to the old stone barn. Shadow, as if understanding the situation, was already waiting for them at the entrance of the barn. Martha looked at the imposing animal, then at the small and fragile girl beside her. Suddenly, she realized that her peaceful life had irrevocably changed. She was now at the center of a plot that seemed to come from a science fiction movie. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. The interior of the barn smelled of old hay and damp wood. Martha closed the heavy door carefully, trying to make as little noise as possible. Through the cracks in the boards, she could observe the men who now surrounded her house. There were 3 of them, all of intimidating appearance with communicators in their ears. "They're searching everything," Martha whispered to Emily, who was huddled in a dark corner. Shadow had entered with them and now remained close to the girl, like a silent guardian. Martha still couldn't fully understand the connection between the two, but she couldn't deny there was something extraordinary there. "We need to get out of here," said Emily, her voice trembling. "They won't give up until they find me." Martha nodded, thinking quickly. "I know these hills like the back of my hand. There's a trail behind the property that leads to the neighboring town. We can follow it when it gets dark." The girl looked at the black horse. "Shadow can take us. He's strong and fast." Martha hesitated. Riding at night on steep trails was dangerous, even for someone who knew the way well. But perhaps it was their only chance. "Have you ridden before, Emily?" The girl nodded with a small smile. "For as long as I can remember, it's as if it were part of me." Martha gazed into the child's eyes, finding in them a strange mixture of innocence and ancient wisdom. There was something about this girl that transcended her age, an understanding that seemed to come from another place, or perhaps from another being. The sound of footsteps approaching the barn interrupted her thoughts. Martha signaled for Emily to remain silent. Both held their breath as the barn door was opened with a creak. One of the men entered, his hand on his waist where he probably carried a weapon. His eyes scrutinized every dark corner of the place. Martha and Emily were hidden behind a pile of hay bales partially visible from where the man stood. Shadow, however, did something unexpected. The imposing black horse came out of his hiding place and positioned himself in the center of the barn, directly facing the intruder. The man backed away, surprised by the sudden presence of the animal. "I found a horse here," he shouted to his companions. While the man was distracted by Shadow, Martha quietly pulled Emily deeper into the barn, where a small back door, almost hidden by time and abandonment, offered an alternative exit. Outside, they heard more voices approaching. The Dihu, other men were coming to check the barn. Martha and Emily escaped through the small door, finding themselves at the back of the property, where the dense vegetation of the Rocky Mountains offered some protection. "And Shadow?" asked Emily anxiously. As if answering her concern, they heard a loud neigh coming from the barn, followed by sounds of confusion and shouts from the men. Moments later, Shadow appeared galloping toward them, unharmed and majestic. "He really is extraordinary," murmured Martha, amazed. Emily smiled, stroking the muzzle of the animal when it approached. "He understands everything. He always has." "Come." "John, we don't have time to waste," said Martha, helping Emily mount Shadow. The elderly woman, despite her advanced age, still retained enough agility to hoist herself onto the horse's back, positioning herself behind the girl. Shadow, as if understanding the urgency of the situation, began a careful walk along the steep trail that entered the dense woods. "Where are we going?" asked Emily as they moved away from the property. "To the house of an old friend in the neighboring town. Frank was a sheriff before he retired. If there's anyone who can help us, it's him." As they advanced through the forest, the darkness of the night became denser. Martha knew these paths well, having traveled them throughout her life. Even so, the journey was challenging, with uneven terrain and low branches they needed to avoid. Shadow, however, moved with surprising confidence, as if he could see in the darkness. Each step was firm, each detour perfectly calculated. "How can he see so well in the dark?" asked Martha, intrigued. Emily smiled in the dark. "He has Midnight's genes. Horses like him always find the way no matter how dark it is. And these genes, are they also in you?" The girl remained silent for a moment, as if reflecting on the question. "Yes, but in a different way. I can't see in the dark like he can, but I feel things. I know when someone is lying or when they're afraid. I can feel what animals feel, especially horses." Martha absorbed the information, trying to reconcile what she heard with her worldview. It was hard to believe, and yet everything she had witnessed in the last 24 hours defied conventional logic. "Your father, Richard Blackwood. What does he intend with these experiments?" Emily sighed, a sound too heavy for a child her age. "He says he's creating the future. Better, stronger people, more connected to nature. But it's not true. He just wants power and money." "And are there other children like you?" "There were some." Emily's voice faltered. "But not all survived the experiments." Martha felt a lump in her throat. The cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. "We'll make him pay for this, Emily. I promise." The small wooden house in the suburbs of Pinewood Springs seemed asleep when Martha, Emily, and Shadow finally arrived, after 3 hours of journey through the steep trails. Soft lights emanated from the windows, indicating that its occupant was still awake despite the late hour. "This is it," whispered Martha, sliding off Shadow's back and helping Emily do the same. The girl seemed exhausted, but remained alert, her large eyes scanning the darkness around them. "Will he really help us?" she asked, her voice low and insecure. "Frank is a good man," replied Martha with conviction. "We've been through a lot together over the years. I trust him with my life. And with yours, too." They approached the door, Shadow following them at a respectful distance. Martha knocked 3 times, a code she had used since her youth when visiting her friend. The door opened to reveal a tall man with grey hair and an erect posture, which betrayed his years in law enforcement. His face, marked by time and experience, showed surprise at recognizing the nocturnal visitor. "Martha, what are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, then noticed Emily and, beyond her, the imposing silhouette of Shadow. "And who are your companions?" "We need your help, Frank," said Martha, the urgency evident in her voice. "Can we come in?" The former sheriff nodded, opening the door wider and letting them pass. His eyes, however, didn't leave the black horse. "And what about the—" "Don't worry about Shadow," intervened Emily. "He knows how to take care of himself. He'll stay nearby, watching." Frank cast an intrigued look at Martha, who simply shook her head as if to say, "I'll explain later." Inside the cozy house, Frank offered hot tea and blankets. While Emily settled on the sofa, Martha moved away with her friend to the kitchen. "What's going on, Martha?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Who is this girl?" Martha took a deep breath, mentally organizing the incredible story she needed to tell. "She's Emily Blackwood, daughter of Richard Blackwood." Frank's eyes widened in recognition. "Blackwood? The horse breeder?" "The same. And what I'm about to tell you will sound crazy, but I need you to listen to the end." Over the next few minutes, Martha recounted everything: the rescue of Emily in the storm, Shadow's extraordinary behavior, the revelations about genetic experiments, Richard's threatening visit, and their escape through the hills. Frank listened in silence, his expression growing increasingly grave. When Martha finished, he remained quiet for a few moments, processing the information. "This is hard to believe, Martha," he finally said. "Genetic manipulation in humans? It's illegal at every possible level. I know it sounds fantastic, but you need to see how Shadow acts, how he understands everything. And the girl, there's something about her, Frank. Something different. The former sheriff sighed deeply. Blackwood is a powerful man with connections at all levels. If what you say is true, we'll need concrete evidence before making any accusations. Martha nodded, having already reached the same conclusion. Emily mentioned documents in the laboratory on the property, records of the experiments, of the results. That would be a start, agreed Frank. But how do we get access to them? At that moment, Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway, her eyes sleepy but attentive. I can help with that, she said, surprising the adults. I know every corner of the property. I know where my father keeps his secret files. Frank looked at the girl with a mixture of admiration and concern. Emily, what your father is doing. You understand that it's wrong, don't you? The girl nodded gravely. I understand he hurt many people, and horses too. He says he's creating a new species, but he's just... She hesitated, looking for the right word. Playing God. The maturity of that observation, coming from such a young child, left the adults momentarily speechless. I have a friend in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, said Frank after a moment of reflection. Michael worked with me on several cases. If we can gather enough evidence, he can help us mount an official operation. How long would that take? Asked Martha, concerned. Blackwood is already looking for us. We don't have much time. With the right connections, we can expedite the process, replied Frank. But we need to be extremely careful. One mistake, and Blackwood will use his influence to cover everything up. Emily, who was listening attentively, intervened. There's one more thing you need to know. Her voice was soft but firm. In 3 days, there will be an important meeting at the property. Foreign investors will come to see the results of the experiments. My father will present me as his greatest success. Martha and Frank exchanged concerned looks. This changes everything, murmured Frank. If we can catch them during this meeting, with the investors present, we'll have a much better chance of dismantling the entire operation. But how will we get in there? Questioned Martha. The property is practically a fortress. A soft neigh came from the kitchen window. Shadow was there, observing them through the glass, his intelligent eyes fixed on Emily. I think we already have. Our way in, said the girl, a small smile forming on her lips. Shadow knows an entrance that no one else knows about. He can take us there. Frank looked from the horse to the girl, still struggling to accept the incredible situation in which he found himself. The next 2 days were of intense preparation. Frank activated his contact at the FBI, Agent Michael Wilson, who listened to the story with initial skepticism but promised to investigate discreetly. Meanwhile, Martha, Frank and Emily elaborated their own plan to infiltrate Blackwood's property and obtain the necessary evidence. On the eve of the operation, sitting at Frank's kitchen table, the three reviewed the final details. A map of the Blackwood property, drawn from memory by Emily, was spread out between them. The main laboratory is here, the girl pointed to an area at the back of the property. It's a white building, far from the main house. My father doesn't like common visitors to see it. Frank studied the map with professional attention. And this secret entrance you mentioned, Emily indicated a wooded area at the back of the property. There's an old fence there, partially hidden by vegetation. There's a section that was damaged years ago and never properly repaired. That's where Shadow usually exits and enters. How? Do you know that? Asked Martha, curious. An enigmatic smile appeared on the girl's face. I didn't know. Shadow showed me in my dreams. Martha and Frank exchanged quick glances. The connection between Emily and the Black Horse continued to surprise them, even after days of coexistence. What exactly are we looking for in this laboratory? Asked Frank, maintaining a practical focus. There's a safe in my father's office, behind a picture of his grandfather, replied Emily. Inside are the original documents of the experiments, signed by international scientists, and also, she hesitated briefly, samples of my DNA, along with Midnight's. And the password for this safe? Inquired Martha. The date of the first successful experiment, said Emily in a small voice. The day I was born, May 17th, 2016. A heavy silence settled in the kitchen. For Emily, understanding the truth about her own existence must be an almost unbearable burden for someone so young. "Emily," Martha gently touched the girl's shoulder, "regardless of how you were born, you are a complete human being, with your own value and identity. Never forget that." The girl nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Sometimes I feel midnight inside me, not like a voice, but like a presence, a force. He protects me even though he's no longer here." "And Shadow, what's his connection to all this?" asked Frank. Shadow was Midnight's inseparable companion. They grew up together at the farm. When Midnight was used in the experiments, Shadow felt it. Since then, he's followed me, as if he knew that a part of Midnight lives in me. Martha felt a lump in her throat. The story was simultaneously beautiful and tragic. "Tomorrow we'll end this once and for all," she affirmed with determination. "Your father won't be able to hurt anyone anymore." That night, while Frank checked equipment and Martha prepared provisions for the next day's journey, Emily silently went out to the yard. Shadow was there, as always, his black coat gleaming under the moonlight. The girl approached and hugged the animal's neck, closing her eyes as she felt the connection between them strengthening. It wasn't just words or thoughts they shared, but emotions, sensations, an understanding that transcended language. Martha observed the scene from the kitchen window, marveling at the evident bond between the child and the horse. Frank joined her, a cup of coffee in his hands. "Do you really believe all this?" he asked, his voice low so as not to break the moment. Martha reflected for an instant. "I believe what I see. And what I see there is real, Frank. Whatever the scientific or spiritual explanation for it." Frank nodded slowly. "Blackwood really did it, didn't he? Somehow broke the barrier between species." "What he did was unethical and criminal," replied Martha firmly. "But Emily, she's a miracle despite everything. An extraordinary human being who deserves to live her life in freedom." Later that night, while everyone tried to rest for the decisive day ahead, Martha was awakened by moans coming from the room where Emily slept. She got up hurriedly and found the girl agitated, murmuring in her sleep, "Midnight, they're coming. Midnight, help." Martha sat on the edge of the bed and gently stroked the girl's hair. "It's all right, dear. You're safe here." Emily's eyes suddenly opened, but there was something different in them. An intensity, a depth that didn't seem to belong to a child. "They know," she said, her voice strangely altered. "My father knows we're here. Someone told him." Martha felt a chill run down her spine. "How can you be sure of that, Emily?" "Midnight showed me, in my dream. He always shows me the truth." Outside, an agitated neigh from Shadow confirmed the uneasiness. Martha ran to the window and saw the animal moving nervously around the yard, his eyes fixed on the road leading to the house. "Frank!" she called urgently. "We have a problem!" The former sheriff appeared at the door, already fully awake, years of police training evident in his readiness. "What happened?" "Emily says we've been discovered, and Shadow seems to confirm it." Frank frowned but didn't question. After days observing the incredible connection between the girl and the horse, he had learned not to doubt their warnings. "We need to leave now," decided Frank, his police experience taking command. "If Blackwood discovered where we are, it won't be long before he sends his men." "Where will we go?" asked Martha, already collecting the few belongings they had brought. "To the original plan, but advanced," replied Frank, checking his phone. "I'll contact Michael immediately. We'll have to act tonight, not tomorrow." While Frank made the urgent call, Martha helped Emily dress appropriately for the cold night. The girl seemed strangely calm now, as if an inner resolution had calmed her fears. "I'm not afraid of him anymore," said Emily, surprising Martha with her firmness. "My father can't control me anymore." "You're stronger than he ever imagined," agreed Martha, gently squeezing the girl's hand. "You're more powerful than he ever imagined," agreed Martha, gently squeezing the girl's hand. Frank returned to the room, his expression grave. "Michael is mobilizing a team, but it will take at least an hour until they reach Blackwood's property. We need to buy time and, if possible, already start gathering evidence." "We'll follow the original plan then," said Martha. Enter through the back with Shadow's help. When they went out to the yard, they found the imposing black horse already, waiting for them, as if perfectly understanding the urgency of the situation. Emily approached him, resting her forehead against his muzzle in an intimate gesture of silent communication. "He's ready," she announced, turning to the adults. "And so am I." The journey to the Blackwood property was tense and hurried. Frank drove his old Jeep on secondary roads, avoiding the main routes where they could be easily intercepted. Shadow accompanied them, galloping parallel through the dense vegetation, his black silhouette appearing and disappearing among the moonlit trees. As they approached the boundaries of the Blackwood property, Frank parked the vehicle in a wooded area, hiding it among the pine trees. "From here we continue on foot," he said, checking the small gun he carried in his holster. Years of police work had taught him never to underestimate danger. Emily guided them through the dense vegetation to the point of the damaged fence she had mentioned. Shadow was already waiting for them there, as if he had materialized from the night itself. "He checked the path," explained Emily, interpreting the animal's behavior. "It's safe for now." Martha and Frank exchanged impressed looks, but followed, in silence. They slipped through the opening in the fence and entered the vast Blackwood property. In the distance they could see the lights of the main mansion, but their target was the smaller and more discreet building at the back of the property, the laboratory. Moving quickly but cautiously, they reached the back of the laboratory without being detected. A service door used mainly by cleaning staff would be their point of entry. "The password is 1705, informed Emily, as Frank typed the numbers on the electronic panel. The door opened with a soft click. Inside, the environment was aseptic and cold. Emergency lights weakly illuminated the empty corridors at this late hour. "This way," whispered Emily, guiding them with the familiarity of someone who knew every corner of that place. They arrived at Richard Blackwood's main office, an elegant room decorated with equestrian trophies and photographs of award-winning horses. Emily went directly to a large painting portraying an austere gentleman with a white beard. "My great-grandfather," she explained briefly, while Frank helped her remove the heavy painting, revealing the safe embedded in the wall. With trembling fingers, Emily typed the combination, 1705-2016. The safe door opened silently. Inside, they found exactly what they were looking for. Meticulously organized folders containing documents, genetic diagrams, and progress reports. Martha began photographing each page with her cell phone, while Frank quickly examined the content. "My God," he murmured as he read one of the reports. "He really did it. Genetically modified a human embryo with equine DNA. These are the initial results," explained Emily, pointing to a specific folder. "There were others before me, but they didn't survive the process." Martha felt a lump in her throat as she realized what the girl was saying. How many failed attempts had there been before Emily? How many lives had been sacrificed in the name of this cruel experiment? "This is enough to put him away for several lifetimes," affirmed Frank, storing some crucial documents in his jacket. A noise from the corridor interrupted them. Voices were approaching. Martha and Frank exchanged alarmed looks, while Emily froze. "It's him," whispered the girl. "My father. And he's not alone." There was no time to escape. The room had only one entrance, and the voices were already too close. Frank positioned himself strategically, ready to protect Martha and Emily if necessary. The door opened, and Richard Blackwood entered, accompanied by two scientific-looking men. His aristocratic face displayed first surprise, then controlled anger at seeing the intruders in his office. "Martha," he pronounced the name as if it were an insult. "I should have guessed that a meddling old woman like you wouldn't give up so easily." His gaze then fixed on Emily, and something in it changed. There was possessiveness there, but also a strange pride. "My most perfect creation," he said, taking a step toward the girl. "My masterpiece." "She's not an experiment, Blackwood," intervened Martha, protectively positioning herself in front of Emily. "She's a child." Richard laughed, a cold and calculated sound. "She's much more than that. She's the future of humanity, the first step toward a new species. "What you did is a crime," declared Frank, his posture firm. "Illegal human experimentation, child abuse, violation of all existing ethical protocols. It's over, Blackwood." Richard seemed unfazed. "Do you really think you can stop me? I have powerful friends, connections at all levels of government. This," he gestured to the scattered documents, "will disappear, as will you." He made a gesture to the men behind him, who took a threatening step forward. It was at that moment that a deafening crash came from outside. Glass shattered, alarms went off, and then, like an apparition of the night itself, Shadow burst through the office window in an impossible leap for an ordinary horse. Chaos ensued. The men backed away. Richard shouted incoherent orders. Taking advantage of the confusion, Frank quickly disarmed the two assistants, while Martha pulled Emily behind Shadow's protection. Richard, realizing he was losing control of the situation, drew a small gun from his jacket, pointing it directly at Emily. "If I can't have her, no one will," he vociferated, the veneer of refined scientist completely undone, revealing the sick obsession behind it. But before he could pull the trigger, Shadow advanced with superhuman speed, knocking him down. The gun fired, the bullet lodging in the E-K ceiling. Frank took the opportunity to immobilize Blackwood, disarming him. At that exact moment, the laboratory doors were broken down, and FBI agents, led by Michael Wilson, invaded the place. "FBI! Everyone freeze," announced Michael, advancing with his team, who quickly took control of the situation. Richard Blackwood, now handcuffed, looked with hatred at Martha and Emily, but there was something more in his eyes. Perplexity. "How?" he murmured to Emily. "How did you manage to control him? Shadow never obeyed anyone but midnight." Emily approached the black horse, caressing his muzzle with tenderness. "I don't control him. We're friends. He protects me because he knows who I am, what I am." Something seemed to break inside Richard. Perhaps the late realization that his creation had developed something that he, with all his science, had never been able to predict. A genuine connection based not on control, but on mutual respect. As Blackwood and his accomplices were taken away by the federal agents, Michael approached Frank, Martha, and Emily. "The documents we found here, along with your testimonies, will be more than enough to keep him locked." "Up for decades," affirmed the agent. "What he did is unbelievable." "And what about Emily?" asked Martha, the concern evident in her voice. Michael looked at the girl, who remained beside Shadow, a surreal image of union between human and animal. "Legally, she'll need a guardian. The state will provide—" "I'll take her," interrupted Martha firmly. "She needs a home, someone who understands her uniqueness." Emily looked at Martha, her eyes shining with hope. "And Shadow?" Martha smiled, putting her arm around the girl's shoulders. "My property has plenty of space for a horse as special as he is." 3 months later, life on Martha's small property had found a new rhythm. Emily attended the local school, making friends with her gentle and perceptive personality. In the late afternoons, she could be seen riding Shadow through the hills, an image of freedom and connection that moved all who witnessed it. Richard Blackwood had been sentenced to 30 years in prison, and his clandestine scientific empire completely dismantled. The other investors involved also faced prosecution in various countries. On that specific afternoon, Martha observed from the porch as Emily and Shadow returned from their daily ride. There was a perfect harmony in the movements of both, as if they were parts of the same being. "Grandma Martha," called Emily, using the affectionate term she had naturally adopted. "Shadow found a new path to the river. It's beautiful there." Martha smiled, amazed at life's ability to find beauty even after so much darkness. Emily was not an experiment, nor an anomaly. She was simply an extraordinary child with a unique gift for connecting with animals in a way that most humans had forgotten. Who knows, thought Martha, perhaps humanity's true advancement wasn't in manipulating genes to create new species, but in rediscovering the deep connection we once shared with all living creatures. When Emily hugged Shadow before entering the house, Their eyes met in a mutual understanding that transcended words. The bond between them was living proof that sometimes the deepest connections are those we cannot see, only feel. Martha knew, watching them, that this extraordinary story was just beginning, and wherever he was, Midnight remained alive, not only in Emily's genes, but in the love that Shadow demonstrated for her every day. Some called it a miracle, others a scientific anomaly. Martha preferred to call it simply love, the most powerful and inexplicable force in the universe.